something to talk about, I guess, is the state of Rivens, if you will. So, when I got into the game, for some context, back in about 2018, very, very early 2018, late 2017, Rivens were kind of really extraneous, almost. They were kind of there as, like, the gacha market, so to speak, like, get people to buy platinum for the Riven market, blah, blah, blah. Like, Rivens were actually pretty expensive. Even unrolled, Rivens went for a decent amount of platinum. Nowadays, like, I don't think there's any unrolled Rivens outside of, like, the companion or Arcwing ones, whatever, that go for a real amount. Because back then, I think the only source that we had for Rivens was sorties, basically. That was about it. I don't remember if there were any other sources. I think sorties was the only thing that you had for quite some time. So, shotgun Rivens, for instance, even veiled, were 80 platinum, just out of the box. And that's incredible for a new player. Like, if you get that out of a sortie, I would have sold that immediately. I probably did a couple times, too. Because getting that 80 platinum basically just for doing your daily is extremely worth it. But where I'm going with this, right, is that there has been a decline in the value of Rivens. This is a number of factors that has kind of culminated in this. But first of all, Rivens are more accessible than they've ever been. And I think that a lot of people kind of downplay this, because back in the day, whenever you would show off a build, right, what you would do is you would never show the Riven in the build, because that's not how that works. You know, not everyone has access to a Riven, yada yada. But I think that that is changing slowly. I think that outside of very specific meta weapons, where, like the Torrid, for example, where, you know, it's the Golden Goose, you know, it's worth hundreds even unrolled or trash rolled. Those are still going to fetch value, but for the most part, like, any given weapon is usually pretty cheap if you just want the Riven nowadays. And rolling Rivens has also been easier than ever, because you just have to play survival for, you know, however long, do Steel Path occasionally throughout the week, and you'll easily cap out with Teshin and get, like, 250,000 Kuva to roll with. Back in the day, this was another thing that gatekept Rivens back in the day, is that Kuva was kind of a pain to come by, generally speaking. Is you really just did not have a good source of Kuva for the most part. Like, they eventually introduced Kuva Survival, but that was a little bit later into the experience. Even then, though, Kuva Survival wasn't the greatest. You were getting, what, like, I think it's like, what, like 400 per, and that's if you had a booster? And so staying in Survival for 20 minutes, like, without a booster is like, what, like maybe a 2,000 Kuva? Something like that, maybe? Give or take, each one takes about a minute and a half. So not only were Rivens inaccessible, they were also hard to roll. And now that has changed, because between Palladino and Teshin and all of that, like Riven Slivers, Rivens have become more accessible than they have ever been. And I think this is all very intentionally done to, one, drive the price of, like, the insane Riven market down, because it used to be so much worse than it is now. Like, I don't think people realize how good they have it when it comes to Rivens these days. Like, I don't mean to go, back in my day, but, like, it really was, you know, back in my day, they really didn't give you much of anything to work with. Because you got your, like, maybe you got a 1 Riven for your sortie. Maybe, not even guaranteed. And then you had the extra layer of RNG of having to try and get the weapon you want out of the Riven. And the type of Riven that you want. Again, shotguns were super rare back in the day. The comb, and other shotguns especially. And these purple jar ranches and cornflakes, exactly, like I said, they just drop out of the sky. We have them in the mission right now. I have 8 for free. I didn't do anything. But nowadays, again, they drop out of the sky. It's like candy. You get them everywhere. Although, fun fact, back in the day, the reason why shotgun Rivens were so expensive is, 1, they were lower drop rate than other Rivens. 2, a lot of shotgun Rivens were necessary for certain builds to function because of how status chance worked. Back in the day, Shotgun status was significantly worse if you did not hit 100% status chance, because status chance used to not go over 100%. It used to cap at 100%. And if you did not hit that cap, then the status chance was divided among pellets and ultimately much worse. But if it was 100%, then every single pellet would do 100% status. You get at least one status per pellet back then. And I mean, obviously, things like that exist today. Like the comb still exists. The comb was the golden goose of that time. Like I said, you also had a lot of, like I said, the builds that just didn't work without Rivens back then. And now we don't have builds that rely on Rivens anymore, but conversely, Rivens are so much more accessible to the common player that I think, in some circumstances, it should be promoted that, oh, Rivens for this weapon are really cheap. You should include this in your build. I think that that is something that we as a community should push for. Because ultimately, there's so much more you can do with a Riven, and because they're so accessible and so easy to get now, especially for, like, weapons that are not necessarily standard. Like, if I just wanted to get, like, even for weapons that have, like, Incarnons that are good Incarnons, like, you can get a Scrun Riven, for example, for really, really cheap, and get a lot of decent rolls that you can build with it out of it. Especially Incarnons, because you can fudge the build a bit to suit the Riven if you need to do that. Like, certain negatives can be compensated for instance. So that's fine. That can happen. But I think one of the ultimate goals of this, I think from DE's perspective, is lowering the Riven market subtly. Now, I want to be very careful with how I phrase this, because this does benefit players, but it also does hurt players, and I think that they are aware of this. In both instances. So, in both forms of it, is that it helps the players because it makes Rivens more accessible and more affordable. However, it hurts players because people who do not engage in the Riven system are now much more screwed out of Platinum that would have been otherwise much easier for them to get. And I feel like there's been a lot of that as of recently, is they've done a lot of things that are, like, you know, big ticket, you know, Platinum items back in the day have now been significantly lowered. Like, old primes are constantly being unvaulted, you know. Primes, like, vaulted prime stuff is worth less. And I like I said, I don't think it's necessarily a malicious thing that's, oh, they're taking away sources of Platinum from the players to encourage players to buy Platinum. Because I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that the sources of Platinum for newer players has just shifted. Because now the thing is because Rivens are so easily accessible, you can now get bulk of them, and that bulk of them sells for about what a single one would go back then. So technically, you're kind of getting the same amount of Platinum for today, it's just spread out among different items. It's like, you can get, like 2 to 3 rifle Rivens in, you know, a given day, right? You know, maybe you get it from Paladino's cycle and you get one from your sortie. You can sell all those and make about, like, 40-ish some Platinum ballpark. And that was about what a rifle Riven would go for veiled back in the day. And also another reason why, you know, veiled Rivens are worth a little bit less today is because the pool is much bigger, so I think a lot of people are less incentivized to get them and roll them. Because even though they are more plentiful, again, much, much bigger pools than they used to have. I remember back in the day that bought a Prime Chamber and its price was fucking tank. Yeah, exactly. That happened now because he brought it once. It's now available, you know, every TennoCon relay, right? As, you know, as like a kind of a special item. Because I don't think he brings that with his normal rotation, but... I mean, if you do want... I don't know if that's actually the most efficient use of ducats for, like, primed parts to ducats to platinum. I don't know if that's the most efficient way to do it, but... Again, borrow is another source of platinum for players as well. I think that that's always been good, is trading primed parts. Like, platinum as a currency has, I think, depreciated over time. Like, I think that as more players have joined, I think that, you know, more platinum gets in circulation, and so on. Like, it's just now the nature of economics that the platinum has depreciated somewhat in value as a player market. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think as long as new players are still able to, you know, access the game for entirely free, as long as there are methods that are reliably able to get free-to-play players platinum, I think that there's not an issue. Like, there's always going to be selling bulk prime parts, there's always going to be, like, evergreen options, you know, trading syndicate augments. That's never going to go away. Unless they somehow change syndicates, which, who knows. But it definitely has, like, been, like, a shift that I think that overall it is slightly more difficult for newer players these days to get platinum, because there's just, like, less, like, you know, nice big ticket items. Like, oh, I can't really take new players on relics, right, and, you know, bring my super expensive, like, 200 platinum Loki chassis relics and put those in and try and get them, you know, the big ticket item, right? Like, I can't do that anymore because there's no real prime parts that are worth that much these days. There's, like, a couple. Like, I think Nova's one of them. Bob-On's up there. But once those come back into prime unvaulting, then those will go back down again, obviously. But ultimately, like I said, I think that ribbons, I think, are something that people should start considering more. Because if they have, like, I know old heads might be against it, but I think that as new players come in, I think that we should encourage them to engage with ribbons a little bit because of how easy it is for new players to get them now compared to back then. Because back then, we didn't recommend it because it was so gated by everything, but nowadays, you know, veileds are everywhere, they're super easy to buy in bulk, you know, random bulk ribbons that you can get for, like, otherwise non-meta weapons are super accessible. So I think that it is worth noting that recommending ribbons in builds, I think, should become more normalized just because it is so much easier than it used to be for players to get that. Like, if I'm doing a build video, I want to be able to say, oh, if you're looking to take this build further, the ribbon for these are very, very cheap. And that is something that I think that should be the extent of it. You know, not pushing for specific roles, but most of the time a ribbon is at least going to be something of a DPS buff to your weapon. Like, almost, like, it would be very hard not to have that. As long as it's able to at least replace one of your mods, and then some. Like, oh, if I get a ribbon with Toxin and critical damage, oh, I can replace the 60/60 Toxin mod on my weapon now. And that's ultimately going to be a DPS boost. Like, I see ribbons as something that... It used to be a luxury item, now it is a, oh, if you really like this weapon, you can upgrade it further. That's how I think it should be viewed nowadays. Not something that every weapon should have, mind you, but something that is a step of evolution for the weapons you really like, and I think that that is a perfect, you know, use case for the system. Because again, ribbons are cheap. Cheaper than they have ever been.